Welcome to the Explainer. So, you've probably heard this before, right? One politician says inflation is dropping, another one says it's stuck in place, and somehow they're both using the same official data. How does that even work? Well, today we're going to decode the art of the economic spin. It's all about how the story you hear really just depends on which numbers they decide to show you.
Okay, let's kick things off with this. A really bold, really clear proclamation from the White House. Inflation has stopped. I mean, wow. A statement like that, it's meant to sound like a massive economic win, right? So what's the proof? What's the specific number they're hanging their hat on?
And there it is, 2.5%. This is the number. This is the figure they're highlighting everywhere as proof that things are working. And on the surface, an average inflation rate of 2.5%, that sounds pretty great, doesn't it? Like a real sign of progress?
But, and this is where things get really interesting, is that the whole story. Because if you look at other official data from the exact same time frame, it paints a completely different and, honestly, a conflicting picture.
So check this out. This is a direct year-over-year comparison. In January, when the new administration took office, the inflation rate was 3.0%. Okay, fast forward 8 months to September, and the rate was still 3.0%. Exactly the same, absolutely zero change.
So, right here, this is the big puzzle, isn't it? How can both of these numbers be correct? How can we have a stagnant 3.0% rate and at the exact same time a triumphant 2.5% average? Well, the whole secret, the whole trick is in how you frame the comparison.
And look, this kind of thing didn't just fly under the radar. A reporter actually challenged the White House press secretary on this point blank. They said, hey, inflation is exactly where it was last year, and people are still feeling it at the grocery store. What's going on?
And here's the official response. Now watch the move here, it's really clever. The focus immediately pivots away from that stagnant 3.0% number and right back to that average of 2.5%. They use it to frame the story as, see, the overall trend is good.
Okay, so that means we really have to pop the hood on that average and see what's actually going on inside. Because this right here is the real heart of the statistical storytelling that's happening.
Because, get this, far from trending down, the most recent data shows the year-over-year inflation rate has actually been climbing for 5 straight months. It's been going up steadily from May all the way to that 3.0% in September. That is the literal opposite of a downward trend.
And what we're seeing is a brilliant example of a classic statistical sleight of hand, the old apples to oranges comparison. What they were doing was comparing a single month's rate, that 3.0% from January, to a totally different kind of number, a smoothed out 8-month annualized average. They aren't the same thing. You can't compare them.
So here's how that works. It's pretty simple. The average conveniently pulls in all those lower inflation numbers from way back at the beginning of the year. And by doing that, it completely hides the fact that things have been trending upwards lately. What you end up with is an average that makes everything look way calmer and more stable than it actually is.
All right, now let's see what happens when this kind of tactic gets supercharged for social media. Where a simple, dramatic graphic can spread like wildfire, and all that important context, well, it's usually the first thing to get thrown out the window.
And boom, here's the graphic. It's designed to be super striking. You see Biden inflation next to a huge 9.1%, and right next to it, Trump inflation at a much, much lower 2.7%. The visual message is just bam. It hits you in a split second, and that's exactly the point.
But, you guessed it, the fine print, the context changes absolutely everything. That 9.1%, that wasn't an average, that was a one-time single-month peak from way back in June of 2022. And the 2.7% on the other side, yep, that's another one of those smoothed-out 8-month averages. It's not even close to a fair fight.
This timeline really shows you just how out of context that 9.1% figure is. It was a peak from June 2022. Think about that. Just 1 year after that peak, inflation was already back down to 3.0%. So taking one single old peak number and trying to make it represent an entire presidency, well, that's not just being selective, that's being deliberately misleading.
So this is just another flavor of the same trick, right? We can call it the peak versus average fallacy. You take the single worst data point from one side and compare it to a nice smooth average from the other side. It's all designed to create the biggest, most dramatic, and most misleading story you possibly can.
Okay, so after seeing all this, what's the big takeaway here? Because this isn't just about inflation stats, right? This is about arming yourself with a kind of media literacy toolkit.
So the real question is, how can you spot this kind of spin out there in the real world?
Honestly, it really just comes down to asking two super simple but really powerful questions anytime you see a statistic. Number one, what exactly is being compared here? Pinpoint the two data points. And number two, is it a fair comparison? Is it apples to apples? Are they even using the same time frame, the same kind of measurement?
At the end of the day, it's all about having a healthy dose of skepticism. It's about training yourself to look past that big flashy headline number and always asking, okay, but what's the context? The goal isn't just to see the numbers, but to see what the numbers are actually doing, and maybe what they're trying to hide.
Because look, the numbers themselves don't lie. That's true. But boy, can they be arranged to tell some very convincing stories. So the real question I want to leave you with is this. The next time you see a statistic in the news, are you going to ask what it's really being compared to?